welcome back to Plein Perspective. Christophe Borel with you here today. And are you in for a treat today? Well, behind me is probably some of the most famous mountains in Chamonix, where I come from. And we've got Les Drues and l'Aiguille Verte. And they both culminate close to 4,000 meters for Les Drues and over 4,000 meters for l'Aiguille Verte. And I thought today, for a bit of a change, that I would do a bit of a sunset painting. It's just such a beautiful place to go and paint from again. And the colors are completely different at sunset. Obviously, with the sun shining onto those rocks, they go from that beautiful soft gray color to a beautiful orangey gray. And I thought I'd show you today how I paint this. But before we do that, again, I'll try to take you to Google Earth and show you where we are. Okay, let's do it. So as you can see, we start from Chamonix usually, and there's a couple of ways to get there. So either through the Train du Montanvert or the cable cab of Les Grands Montets. Either ways, you have access to the base of those mountains. So now that you know where we are, I just want to give you an idea of the height. So Les Drues, which if you can see on my little mouse pointer here, is at 3,754 meters. And the Aiguille Verte right here on the top here is at 4,122 meters. And I said to you, they are probably some of the most famous climbs we can do in the Alps, especially the north faces. Either summer or winter climbs are incredibly difficult. So anyway, don't want to bore you with climbing techniques, and let's go painting instead. So let's get started. See you soon. Okay, so as for my usual palette, I've just added a few colors like burnt umber, cadmium yellow deep, and yellow ochre. So you can see now that I've started as usual with my sky, and I've got my usual board, MDF board 3mm, which I've primed and put a bit of yellow ochre color on the top to take away the white and just allow that translucent yellow to come through the colors. And now I'm starting that amazing cloud above Les Drues and La Verte. It's one of those clouds that usually predict bad weather. So if you were sitting on top of the mountain on that day, you'd be blasted away from the super strong wind. And those clouds are called lenticular clouds. And they are, as I say, in the Alps, they're a very strong sign of bad weather. And all I've done is use the cerulean blue, the white for the sky. And now I've just added a bit of raw sienna, Payne's grey, and a bit of orange to build up that sort of first layer of the cloud. Just reworking the blues because they were turning a bit too green with the orange. And now just for a bit of a change, I thought I'd start with the foreground color, and what I've used here is a bit of more burnt umber, orange, just to give that sort of orangey brown color to the base, and just adding up now a bit of purple at the base to darken the base of the mountain because of the shadow is reflecting from the sun, obviously. Now I'm just starting to work the shadow side of the mountain, and I've just used again the bit of purple, raw sienna, and burnt umber. And what I'm doing now is just working the shapes very, very briefly, trying to establish, as I said, the shapes as well as I possibly can. Because it's such a small, painting, it's very difficult to give too much details. But at the same time, like I said previously, you try to be as accurate as possible. Still using the same colors. And obviously I will be reworking those colors quite a lot as I go along. I'm just trying to make this part of the shadow a little bit darker because it's a bit closer to us. So I've added a bit more purple to the mix. Now I'm starting to work the highlight side of the mountain. I started with the white, a bit of orange, but as you will probably see later, I'm going to constantly rework that color. I wasn't happy with it. It was just too yellow. And as you can see on the board, you can barely see the difference between the color I'm putting on and the yellow ochre on the board, and which means it was just way too yellow. But at least I would just, I say, not to get worried. I say that will drive, by the next day. And it's just to establish the shape of the mountain, the colors, just give me some ideas of where I'm heading. Now I'm just working a bit of the shadow snow that is on the mountain. Again, just to give me some ideas where I'm going with the painting and where I'll need to rework and where it's working, where it's not working. I say the whole time I will be reworking that painting over the next 2 or 3 days. And where I'm working now is a bit more sun highlight, so the rock on the cliff face is a bit lighter. So it's really a game between shadows and light on the mountain. And it's just a matter of defining, the colors the best you can. And because those mountains are so huge, and the painting is so small, you have to understand this is more of a study, piece of work rather than a finished work. But at least, you get to see what I'm doing, how I paint those mountains. I know them very well. I see them in front of my face just about every day when I'm at home. Now I'm just working a bit of reflection of the snow, so it's just a bit of white and that cadmium orange or cadmium yellow dip. And just putting a few more of those highlights onto the mountain. Just adding a few more details, trying to shape the mountains and the rock. I apologize for the noise outside. Now I can't control that. Hopefully it doesn't last too long. So this is day 2 now, and I'm refocusing on trying to get those colors a bit more accurate. I said to you before, the color I had applied before was just a bit too yellow, so now I'm adding a little bit more alizarin crimson into the mix and make it a little bit more red. And just adding different levels of alizarin crimson and burnt sienna. When the sun hits the rock face, it actually gets quite red, and the colors I'm putting on there are actually quite accurate. It does get very bright, and the reason I'm leaving this whiter or clearer space in the base there is because the rocks have fallen down and the rocks have fallen down and left some marks on the cliffs. Now I'm just trying to re-establish some of the shadow of the mountain cliff. The mountains, especially in summertime with the global warming, are just breaking apart all the time, and there are more and more common rockfalls. Now I'm reestablishing a bit more dark, just trying to reshape the mountain, but I will be going over those again several times. It's just a matter of looking at it and thinking, yes, does it work? Doesn't it work? Does it look right? Or doesn't it look right? Right now I'm using a lot of that alizarin crimson burnt umber raw sienna, and it's quite browned, and you'll probably see me later redoing it, because actually brown is not really a common color you'll see on the mountain cliff. It will be more of the blues, the grays, and all of it there, especially in the sunset. There's just a bit of orange I did to it from the reflection of the sun on the rocks. Now I'm just trying to work a little bit on the highlight of the mountain cliffs, and I said just reshaping it, adding a few details here and there. And as I said, on such a small scale it's really difficult to give it the full size or the full value of the size of the mountain. And at this stage, the mountain doesn't look right, and you'll see me changing quite a few things very soon. Now I'm still trying to re-establish a few bits of shadows. Still using the same colors, just playing up with that burnt umber, white. Now I'm just starting to add a little bit more details on the reflected side of the snow. I've got white and a bit of lemon yellow. And as you can see here, I'm putting way too much highlight, and I'll be going over those again. Problem with the snow, you always want to try to put too much in there, and when it's that far away you can't physically see that much snow, especially in summertime. So here I'm just trying to fix the issue with having put too much snow onto the cliffs. And while I'm doing that, I'm constantly looking at the picture I'm using as a reference. But it's really difficult not to get bogged in, because the mountains are so complex and you want to try to get them right. Now I'm re-establishing the darks, and I'm using now a bit more ultramarine blue in my mix, because that brown was just too brown. And on that side of the mountain I'm just adding up a little bit of white to lighten up the shade, because the sun, even though it's not shining on the mountain, it's still reflecting quite a lot on the shadow side. It's all very subtle touches. Reworking the rocks, cliff and shapes, and the more colors you add onto those rock cliffs, the more realistic it becomes, because really when you look up close, it's just so many different colors. So by adding all those different shade and values of yellow ochre, raw sienna, orange and burnt umber and so on, you eventually get to the point where it starts to look a bit more three-dimensional. Now just working the lower part again, just re-establishing the shade. So I've got alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and just trying to work out some of those shadow side. Just working really quickly on this because it's not the most important part. I'm just trying to give it some form of definition. I'll be going over a few of those a bit later on as well. As you can see, as we add the shadows, it just makes it a bit more interesting. So now I'm just using alizarin crimson, orange, and going over the mountains here. Just being pretty rough and not being very careful. Just trying to add a bit of interest into the colors, shadows and light, but without going crazy. As I said, this is not the most important part of the painting, and I've just added a bit of white on that, again just to give it that three-dimensional effect. Re-establishing a few of the darks. Now obviously this is day 3. You may have recognized the sound of the explosion there. Sorry about all the noise, but just having a bit of fun. I'm just rediscovering my Adobe Premiere Pro and just having a play with it. Sorry if I work you up a bit too hard. Now here we go. I'm working now on the lenticular cloud, which I mentioned before, which is a sign of really bad weather, especially in the Alps. When you see those guys popping up on top of a summit of a mountain, you know some serious weather is coming in or is already there. And what I'm doing here is just using white, ultramarine blue, just to rework my sky. And you may have realized I'm using my fingers a lot. Fingers, a fantastic way of blending for skies. Way better than brushes. And I'm just using a little bit of the orange in that soft mix of sky that I've got, just to work out a little bit of those difference in colors between the blues, the grays, the slightly orangey yellows, and so on and so on. And as I'm putting the sky in, I'm also working on the mountain edges and redefining them. Just using cerulean blue and white in my sky, just redefining a few of the shapes. And those clouds are absolutely phenomenal in size, and as I say, when you see them coming over those mountains, you know some seriously bad weather is happening. We're talking super strong wind, snow, and so on. Now I'm just working a little bit more on the shadow snow of the mountain, and that's when it's going to start to take shape and again create a bit more interest. And I'm using a very thin brush to work those marks. And the color is just a bit of cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, white. And you can add a bit of paint gray as well to make it that blue gray. Now I'm just using my ultramarine blue into that mix because I thought the brown just didn't work for me. But now, as you can see on the painting, the blue doesn't work that well either, and the brown looked a bit better. But I think at the end, when I reworked everything, it sort of looks okay. Now that the blue you see is far more saturated than the actual blue that I've used on the painting, unfortunately. But I think more or less it will come together, and I've just added the white and that yellow orange mix into the blue. But again, as you can see, I'm constantly adjusting my temperature colors Sunsets in the mountains are actually very difficult to paint, because nothing really makes sense in the way of colors. And again, the best way to paint that is to be on location, but the window of opportunity to paint those colors on location is so short that you just have to rely on your memory. Still trying to make sense of all this. And constantly trying to work out the values and see what's right, what's wrong, fixing things, cracks in the mountains. Now just adding a bit more of that white and lemon yellow, just to make them pop a little bit more. I'm trying to rework again those that snow in the shade. I'm still using a thin brush, and the mix, as you saw, it was ultramarine blue, white and cerulean blue. I'm now coming towards the end of the painting. You can keep going and going and going, but I think you can see now that we got the overall desired result. And that was the end of it. Thank you very much again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And here's the final painting, and you can see a little bit more of what's going on.